Hello, and welcome to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe. I'm the editor of the Flyfish Journal and the host of Sidechannels, along with our photo editor and my good friend, Kopi Voita. Since 2009, the Flyfish Journal has been fly fishing's independent voice for culture, people, art, and adventure. Owned by fly fishers and produced near the water. Like our print publication, Sidechannels will feature culture, adventure, art, and conservation through thought-provoking, in-person interviews with fly fishing's most compelling individuals. Visit theflyfishjournal.com/sidechannels to learn more and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, I think probably like a lot of guides, I love to fish. And I just want to spend more time in the water. So I was like, fishing guide it is.
Yeah.
So when I graduated college, I went to University of New Hampshire.
Okay.
And
what'd you study?
Environmental and business economics. Failed out of the business school.
Failed out?
Failed out. So I was like, I've got enough credits
You're fishing too much?
to clean up on this next major.
That was guide and striped bass advocate Kyle Schaefer, and you're listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe, and I'm the editor of the Flyfish Journal, as well as your host, along with our photo editor, Kopi Voita. I'm recording this just as summer is getting ready to slip into fall, which means our fall issue will be hitting mailboxes soon, and we are deep into production on our winter issue. If you don't want to miss either one, visit theflyfishjournal.com and become a subscriber. There's just so much good stuff coming up in Volume 16, you won't be disappointed. This will be our final episode for Season 1 of Sidechannels, which is kind of hard to believe. It's been quite the trip. Thanks to everyone who's shared their thoughts on what they've enjoyed with the show. If you're digging it, please leave us a review and rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It definitely helps people find the show, and it's great to get the feedback from folks. The plan is to be back with a second season before too long, and who knows, maybe we'll drop some bonus content in the meantime. One thing I do know is that we wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of Decked. Decked is a truck bed organizing system that will save you time and sanity, and it's been a real game changer for me this summer. I'll share a few more final Season 1 thoughts on my deck system at the break, but if you can't wait, visit deck.com/flyfish to learn more. It's also been a distinct pleasure to partner with Patagonia this season. Just as the Flyfish Journal is committed to bringing you timeless pieces of fly fishing culture, Patagonia is committed to making goods that last. They utilize clever engineering and innovative materials to offer only essential gear made for a lifetime of hard use. It's a commitment that is matched by their dedication to fighting for and protecting our home planet. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fishing to get your hands on some gear that is built to connect with wild fish and wild places. So Kyle Schaefer, man, I had been wanting to connect with Kyle for quite some time. The quick bio hits here. Kyle is a striped bass guide out in Maine for a portion of the year, mainly the summer, I think. He is also the owner, along with his wife, Kitri, of Soulfly Lodge in the Berry Islands in the Bahamas. On top of all that, he's a board member with the American Saltwater Guides Association, which does a bunch of great work out along the East Coast with regards to stripers, menhaden, redfish, bluefish, albies, all that good stuff out there. Great organization. Look them up, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and impressed. But when I say I've been wanting to connect with Kyle, it's primarily because he's someone who I think is really putting his money where his mouth is. He has a strong set of values and He's committed to sustainability, and he's been working hard to ensure that those values show up in his business practices. He was an early member and proponent of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, and he's someone who I think sees his role as a lodge owner in the Bahamas as being about much more than just making money or getting clients into fish, though I think most lodge owners, at least lodge owners I've talked to, don't necessarily get into it for the money anyway, at least at first. In any case, the thing I've found most interesting about Kyle and all the time I've spent talking with him about this stuff is how much he thinks about community and culture to some extent as well. From talking with him and from talking with others who've visited Soulfly Lodge in the Berry Islands or done other work with Kyle, the lodge itself definitely sounds like a place that takes its position as part of that Berry Islands community very seriously, which is an important consideration in my mind, especially when it comes to something as historically extractive as fly fishing lodges in places like the Bahamas. I think it's safe to say that Kyle and his team and partners are really putting back just as much as they are getting out of that lodge in the Berry Islands. Anyway, Kyle and I chatted in a Portland, Maine hotel room after about 10 hours of driving from Quebec's Gaspé Peninsula. We'd gone up there for a sort of exploratory trip, first-hand look at some flats fishing for stripers and Atlantic salmon fishing on some of the Gaspé's classic rivers, the Bonaventure, the Cascapedia, Petite Cascapedia, so on and so forth. So it was a hell of a trip. I caught my first stripers and had the, I guess, distinct pleasure of watching salmon after salmon ignore my and everyone else's flies. Kyle himself was a pleasure to spend some time with, both on and off the water. I can definitely see how he would be one of those guides you'd want to return to year after year if you could. He's just got such a warm, welcoming personality and presence on the water, and he is one of those guides I think that you want to catch fish for them. Unfortunately, Kopi wasn't along for this one, but he sends his regards and he'll be back when we dig into our next round of episodes. But in the meantime, enjoy this chat with Kyle. Hopefully we don't sound too fried after 10 hours in the car together. Let's get to the show.
You know, a lot of times because I try to be forward about the conservation work that we're doing, I end up attracting conservation-minded clients to my guiding business. So yeah, it's a great place to be talking about what we're working on, finding fits for new donors, building new advocates. And that kind of ties really nicely into the lodge business too. Mm-hmm. You know, it seems like a lot of people I'm guiding are going to Soulfly Lodge in the Bahamas, which we're just entering our 4th season. Mm-hmm. But it's certainly never a dull moment. I mean, lots of work to do in all 3 of those fronts, but also the diversity in the work week keeps me very fresh and engaged, and I can kind of shift in and out of whatever needs the highest priority at the moment.
Yeah. Were there one thing I've gotten to know about you, I think, and one thing that I've gotten to appreciate about you is how closely tied in those 3 things are for you: guiding, running the lodge, and conservation, and how, you really sort of wear it on your sleeve. Mm-hmm. You're kind of, putting your money where your mouth is, or your mouth where your money is. What's the phrase? But I wonder if were there models, were there people out there that you saw kind of doing that thing or moving in that direction? Or conversely, were there models that were really not doing that you thought, and you don't have to call anybody out, but of course, were there models out there for that kind of steered you in that direction?
Yeah, I think I can like remember my kind of a first moment of like awakening of I know that at some point in my life I will be spending a lot of time on conservation work and helping protect the places we love. And that was in college. But fast forwarding, it felt like I was just waiting for the moment when I was either could be effective or I was ready or I was aligned enough to actually like dig in. And that really started when I became a saltwater guide and seeing things firsthand and connecting with my now and still mentor, Tony Friedrich, who runs the Guides Association, started bringing me along, teaching me and showing me how to be effective. And he was just building me as an advocate and just with hopes that it would turn into a person that's committed to this. So that's kind of how it started for me. And then the more deep I got into things, there were people to look up to, Dave McCoy and Hillary Hutchison, both people I look up to for how committed they are and how it's weaved in. And, I remember before I even met Dave in person, he'd call me up or tried to steer me in some directions. And I appreciated that. Yeah. And then getting to know Hillary better and seeing all the work that she does. And, and her and I both had similar opportunities to testify in front of the Senate earlier this year. So it was cool to see other people on the same path and all at different points. And so I'm, definitely look up to those people that are, they're fishing guides, but they're almost parallel level. They're conservationists and really advocating for our fisheries to continue and to be able to keep accessing them. Yeah.
Tell me about Tony. So he started ASGA?
He did.
And ASGA it seems like it's more of an East Coast thing. Is that right? Or is it kind of reaching beyond this zone? Tell me, because I don't know a lot about it. I'm sure, there's people out west that maybe don't know as much about it. So
yeah, definitely. And, it really originated, Tony's been a fisheries policy, expert for many years and has seen a lot of things happen over a 20, 30 year period. And eventually just got frustrated that there wasn't an organization out there that was unifying recreational anglers that just appreciate abundance in our oceans. And abundance drives everything for all of us, whether it's commercial interests or recreational. And it's just something we all should be able to agree on. And so it was born out of frustration. And so that was 6 years ago. And that was really kind of centered around when we started got going. I was one of the early board members. I represent the state of Maine, still do, and now I'm consulting for the organization. But we really started around striped bass and advocating for that species, just because it's been, ups the fish rebound, they get fished way, way, way down. We see it coming for years and then have to make corrective actions. And, even there was a moratorium in the 90s, early 90s and 80s. And so it's really started on that platform to protect and save this very valuable game fish. And from there, we've grown, and Tony's work has always spanned, very broadly, not just focus on striped bass, but it's really marine conservation. And so we're working on everything from Atlantic herring to menhaden to redfish in the Gulf of Mexico. And so we're really centered around the East Coast, the Southeast, and then the Gulf of Mexico. But we're growing, because we're really an organization that solely focuses on fisheries policy, marine fisheries policy. So, because everywhere you look, it's mostly the issue is overfishing. Of course, there's a million other factors, climate change and habitat. But, if you're driving abundant stocks of fish and that's where your reference point is, we're in a much better, much more resilient place to combat habitat and climate and rapidly changing conditions.
Well, how was it when you testified? That was earlier this year, like March?
It was January, actually.
It was January.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was wild. So it was a lot.
Was it intimidating?
It was, and it was intense on the prep work because you're, And
did you do that? Sorry, did you do that in your role as a ASGA board member, or were there kind of different roles that you were appearing before the Senate or appearing before Congress in?
Yeah, well, it originated because Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island was looking for the right witnesses to testify, and so their office, White House's office, reached out and was looking around and ended up talking to a couple organizations. My name came up, and I had an interview with some of the staffers, and I was like, I guess I'm trying to sell myself here to get this opportunity that I'm terrified of. But
did you want to do it? I
did, but because I knew it was going to be very uncomfortable. So it was going to be like an opportunity for growth, So I was like, this is way outside of my comfort zone. I do not fancy myself a public speaker. Yeah. Although after that, I have a lot more confidence. But But yeah, it was a lot of prep work. You prepare a written testimony, a long and a short version. So there's one that you're going to read, and then you've got your long one that goes on record, and then you've got the whole question and answer period that's where certain senators are teed up to maybe lay into you. Maybe they're frustrated that they're talking about climate at the budget committee. The Republican senators certainly weren't. Yes, we got off easy. My session did, but really? There's a couple of senators out there that, put the screws to these witnesses, and
really?
And just it gets intense. So we're literally focusing on particular senators and the questions they may ask. And so I did
in your prep work.
In the prep work. And you're getting grilled. Like I did a full day in DC before, getting grilled by people that are just pros at this. And they're helping you not get into those situations so you can be effective. And so your message can resonate and it doesn't get squashed by somebody with a different agenda.
Yeah.
But
so you didn't have to experience any of that yourself?
I didn't. Mine was positive across the board. I got some great questions and had some cool conversations, and it was very interesting.
Yeah.
So got lucky.
Yeah. That's wild. Is it something that you have any hope or interest in doing more of? Just kind of continuing to do that, continuing to get in there and sort of, get dirty, I guess, in that sort of political world.
Yeah, I think so, because I feel like I'm at a point where I have enough to give back that it's important to step up, even if it's not necessarily convenient or you're like all of a sudden, I didn't expect to put, 60 hours into that in January, but all of a sudden that's what I was doing. But, so I think the answer is yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, I don't think it's not what we're all hoping to be, working on, but it's a necessity and I feel ready for it now. Yeah. So I'm here for it.
Nice. Well, let's go back. So where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. Right in the Chesapeake Bay. So kind of in the midst of all sorts of cool fishing and waterman lifestyle
were you
there.
Fishing or fly fishing as a kid?
I was.
Yeah, fly fishing?
Fly fishing.
How'd you come to it?
A very cliche from I watched the river run through it in second grade. Fell in love with it. I was already obsessed with fishing. Would drive by a puddle and wonder what was in it. And so watching that, I was like, that is cool. And so I got my first fly rod, and I think eventually got ran over by a vacuum. So I had some down years. Maybe grade 3 and 4 were down years, but I ended up coming back to it and just loved it. I loved just connecting to something. Else.
Soul fly especially, it seems like from the outset you've set out to do something different with it. You've kind of, it's an operation that is kind of, I know that you have worked to integrate it with the community, You're, really focused on sustainability, I think, from conversations that we've had. And so, I'm wondering where those seeds were planted, if that makes sense. What did your folks do?
Yeah, my parents, definitely, they both loved the outdoors, and but I think this stuff was just kind of in me,
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is just like a feeling very connected to something that you can't really put words to, just this higher power that is the outdoors, and wanting to continue to access it, and wanting it to be fair, want it to not be taken from us, it, by industry, by things that, are more short-term gain, when we have this stuff that can sustain for, hundreds of years and thousands of years when we let it. And so it's always felt like it was kind of in me. My mom, though, she's an artist, and watching her as a kid, she would, she's done kind of every medium from sculpture to glass design and really cool stuff. And she'd have a lot of conservation stuff at the core. Like she did this Jane Goodall chimpanzee when I was a kid. And it raised money for Jane Goodall's Institute.
Like a painting?
It was, like a little metal chimpanzee. And so she's had so many of these little art pieces that have had a conservation tie. And so I think I probably did get a lot of that from her.
Yeah.
So very, very thankful for that. But it also just feels like, I definitely kind of lead myself and keep trying to tap into like, what is my purpose? And that feels like it's very much so a part of it.
Yeah. Do you remember sort of the first time that kind of clicked for you as an outdoorsman, as an angler? When did the recognition or realization of that sort of crystallize for you, do you think?
I think I've been steadfast working on that stuff for a while, but it's really felt like these last 2 years that it's really has set in as like, this is a third leg of the stool, and this is very important. And also I feel like I'm starting to be more effective, which is cool, because early on I'm just like, I don't know how to be effective at any of this stuff. I'm just learning and reading and speak up on a public comment period. And then you start to learn more about the systems and meet more people and network and connect. And all of a sudden you see these paths starting to open up to get the things done that we want to get done. And that's pretty cool. Even after like that, testifying in front of the Senate Budget Committee, it started some relationships, and all of a sudden we're having, conversations with staffers that are thinking about, maybe a forage fish bill or something along those lines. And you're like, oh, wow, this is really cool.
On the national level?
Yeah. And so it's like stuff you're getting to have input on, and thank goodness for, the expertise of ASGA, because we can actually kind of take advantage of those opportunities. And it doesn't just have to be me that's getting having these conversations, even though it did kind of spur from that testifying. But so, it really feels like these past couple of years, it's like, it's been, kind of hit the stride a little bit more. Yeah. But
so, it sounds like it sounds like the place where you are now, with all the conservation work you do, as well as just, having a business and being a guide. I guess I was wondering if, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you would have seen yourself in this position. I don't know what the answer is. It almost seems like maybe you would have seen yourself, or maybe you would have liked to see yourself in this position. Is that the case?
That's accurate. I was hopeful. It wasn't like I stumbled upon it. I feel like I've been working to this direction. And a lot of it started by being a seasonal striped bass guide.
Yeah.
You've got 7 months of plenty of time to find other work to do. You got a great season. And then, so I ended up doing a lot of different contract type stuff in the industry, whether it was marketing stuff or writing for a conservation group or things like that. And so I was always trying to work towards this goal. I wasn't quite sure where it was going, or where it would lead me, but absolutely 10 years ago, I at least was like trying to point the compass in this direction, but I didn't know where it was going to go.
Yeah. What was it what do you think it is that has gotten you to that point where you feel like you're now, you've become effective basically in what you want to do? You feel like you're, maybe helping to make changes, or, moving the needle in that direction. Like what do you think the secret sauce was there, or was there one?
I think it's just sticking with it, and really knowledge being, I think, one of the biggest parts, especially in kind of fisheries policy and fisheries management. It's so complex, and it's so hard to get people engaged and involved of it, because the complexities can lose people along the way. So I think that was a big part of it, was just sticking with this stuff, and then meeting the players, meeting the people that make things work, that make things happen, and seeing those paths and opportunities. But
who are some of those players? Like, you mean politicians?
Yeah, it could be politicians. It could be other advocates, other people on fisheries policy. It could be working closer with Patagonia. Being an ambassador for them, there's a lot of alignment on some really, really cool issues. So working with the right people there. Yeah. And it just seems like if I can keep conservation, a part of guiding, a part of Soulfly Lodge, it's all kind of blended together, and keeping that top of mind. That's really been kind of, I think, just sticking with it. And just trying to keep educating yourself. I mean, we were just driving, you and I were listening to a book on tape about menhaden. It's a pretty dry topic, but just trying to soak up knowledge and learn where we've made mistakes and see opportunities where we can all agree on the right stuff moving ahead. Yeah, for sure. How do you think you've been successful in sort of, it seems like with, running a business, whether it's just a guide business or the lodge, or you're even kind of branching out into a couple of different areas, how do you keep those different parts integrated, focusing on conservation, focusing on sustainability, because it must be nerve-wracking in some sense, like you got to support your family, you got to support these other people who are sort of depending on you in different ways. Like, how do you ensure that you are not going to have to sort of sell your soul at some point? Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think there's a major upside to focusing on this stuff and being forward about it. And for me, the upside has been, I have my striped bass clients I put out there what I care about, and in return, people see that, and I've attracted this wonderful group of clients, and I think it's very much so the same in the Bahamas. And of course, there has to make economic sense, of course, and so with the lodge, if we weren't successful, if we didn't have the bookings, the fishery wasn't any good, we just wouldn't have the opportunity to do the right stuff. And we got lucky to open Soulfly Lodge at the right time and the right period, where we did have a lot of demand, and we put something together that people liked and wanted to come back to. And, so we really needed to be successful to kind of be like, okay, well, our lowest hanging fruit for sustainability is putting solar panels on, and that's not cheap in the Bahamas. And
really?
So, we just completed that project. We're going to get, half of our power from solar now, which is awesome. And we're going to hopefully get to 100% in the next several years. But,
Wow.
so, and I really find too, like it's taking care of the places and taking care of the people. And we really put our staff first down there, and which, putting our team first and taking really good care of them. I mean, the clients, when they leave, they feel that, you feel this like connectivity with the team, and it's not, everybody wants to be there, from the staff to the clients, and it just is a really cool family feel. And I think everybody's just kind of bought into like what we're doing and the clients that we're trying to attract, and why they like the lodge, why they like hanging out with the community there. And so it all just kind of builds this little ecosystem for us, where it's on a theme of caring about deeper things. Hence Soulfly, where, the soulful pursuit of our sport and moving through this world, and having it be about something deeper than just numbers of fish and things like that. And so I think trying to weave all that in together, it really does seamlessly kind of all go together and become something that's fun for the right people.
Yeah. That's one thing that is kind of funny, because we are together right now because I just joined you for a little sort of, I don't know, exploratory trip up on the Gas Bay Peninsula to not catch Atlantic salmon. But we did catch some stripers. Those were my first stripers I've ever caught. So that was great. Crazy fishing, beautiful place. But it's, so first time I met you, and, what is interesting to me is that, I'm not surprised to hear you to talk about the soul of the sport now that I've met you, and we had a lot of windshield time together. Like, I can tell that you are somebody who, takes that side of it very seriously. And it, if I had just met you, it would almost seem surprising to me that you're also out there testifying before Congress. And because, it almost seems like it would be dueling parts of your personality. Do you is that something that you feel, or is it it's just you through and through, and there's not like competing sides to you?
Yeah, I don't feel like I've got competing sides to me in that sense. Probably in a couple other areas. But in that sense, I think that is one of the coolest things about where guiding can take you, and like being a fishing guide, and then all of a sudden being an expert witness on what you've seen is really cool. I thought that was like, that was a major highlight for me in my career, because like, you're just like, I'm just a fishing guide. I just take people out to fish. But if you're keenly observing for years and you're seeing things changing and happening, that is actually valuable information to our federal government at the highest level. That was really cool. So it more so seems like it's an opportunity that is out of my comfort zone, but I would have said yes 1,000 times in a row for it,
Do you have a sense of, do you see that change in sort of the greater guiding community? People that are, because guiding is one of those things. I did a little bit for a few years, and it's one of those things that it would be very easy to just kind of get into your sort of little guide world and stay there and not really come out. And, might get involved here and there, but, it's one of those things you could just kind of get lost in and just kind of be there. And so, to be pushing beyond that and doing the advocacy, and that work with ASGA and whatnot. Do you see that in sort of the greater guide community around you and even further afield?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It seems like there's just more and more people willing to speak up and to work hard and make changes. So I don't know. I do think about like, what is the catalyst for that? Obviously, I think we're at a period where we have a lot of things changing. Yeah. And so I think people are seeing more startling things happen. Maybe people in certain fisheries are, out west, hoot owl closures and just all these, there's a lot of things restricting our ability to fish. So I think that is showing a lot of guides who are daily observers of that need to step up, need to keep adding voices to these fights. Yeah. So I think probably a lot of it's got to be cause and effect. I'm seeing this, so I'm going to step up. I'm going to find my entry point into actually doing this work.
We'll get back to Kyle in a moment, but before we do that, I've got a few words about our sponsor, Decked. Though Kopi and I actually live a few hours apart, a couple weeks ago I found out that he was going to be down in my neck of the woods getting himself a new guitar amp, and in an example of how fishing trips often come together for me, I decided to drop everything, don't tell our boss, very last minute and get a little fishing in with him. I even managed to break off a bunch of carp and break a rod tip in the process. One thing that actually made this a somewhat reasonable decision was the fact that the majority of the fishing gear I needed was already stocked up and organized in my Decked drawer system. If anything, I think I just needed to grab some wading boots from the mudroom and I was good to go. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have gone fishing if not for my Decked system. What I am saying is that Decked made the decision to get out and get after it that day that much easier. Whether you're a work-from-home dad like me or just a person with normal human responsibilities like just about everyone, Decked can help take the guesswork and prep work out of getting out there and snagging some time outdoors. Of course, Decked products are made in the USA and shipping is always free, so get Decked and get after it, like I did a couple weeks ago, by visiting decked.com/flyfish to figure out which system best fits your rig.
How'd you get into guiding?
Well, I think probably like a lot of guides, I love to fish. And I just want to spend more time in the water. So I was like, fishing guide it is. Yeah. So when I graduated college, I went to University of New Hampshire.
Okay.
And
what'd you study?
Environmental and business economics. Failed out of the business school.
Failed out?
Failed out. So I was like, I've got enough credits
You're fishing too much?
to clean up on this next major. So yeah, I was really focused on skiing too at that point. And so graduated college, moved west and started guiding in the summer and running a ski shop in the winter, and did that for 5 years. And that's in
Colorado?
In Colorado.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Just working on ranches, traipsing around the river, showing people good times.
Yeah.
We had some great trout fishing. We had record snow years. It was just like a 5-year extension of college. Moved out there with some of my best buddies, just had an absolute blast. So I loved it. But after 5 years, it felt kind of like, for me at least, trout guiding in Colorado kind of ran its course. It felt like there was something else. I didn't know what it. Well, I definitely wanted to become a saltwater guide, but I knew it's a long path. To learning your fishery, to getting a boat.
What was it when you say you wanted to do that? Like, what was that? Were you thinking already about stripers in the Northeast, or were you thinking maybe Florida or maybe the Gulf and redfish? Like, what was the sort of big dream at that point then? Yeah.
So I knew it was getting close to time to leave Colorado, and New England feels like home. Even though I grew up in Maryland, I was born in Cape Cod, have a lot of family in New England, and those waters just really resonate with me. I would go to Cape Cod a lot as a kid in the summer, and that just has always been like that special place. So to be able to live there and become a fishing guide there was a big goal. And my family's up in New Hampshire and Maine, and they all had moved up over the past, 15, 20 years or so. And so Maine was a pretty...
Your folks as well?
Yeah, my folks as well.
Yeah.
And my sister's right in the same town as me and Kitchery and Micah. And so we, I moved back with that hope. And I knew I needed like a job in the meantime because I had to learn my home water and put in a few years to get good enough to, hang my sign up. Yeah. And
what was that learning experience like?
It was actually the fishery was the striped bass fishery, and it was like 2012, 2011. It was excellent. The fishery was
it
awesome?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of fish around. Good time to learn it.
Yeah.
Or I'd say probably an easier time to learn it.
Were you already like figuring out the flats thing?
Yeah.
At that point, how long has the, I've been aware of the striped bass sort of flats fishery. But is that something that has been around for a long time? Because I feel like, I grew up in Washington State. There's no stripers there. And so the striper thing was always a little foreign to me. But the picture of it in my mind was either dudes standing on jetties, casting big surf rods, just getting blasted by surf, or, people out in, big center consoles or whatever out offshore, fishing to big bait balls and that kind of thing. So, I guess what I'm wondering is, has that flats fishery always kind of been around in the form it is now, or is that more of a recent development?
No, it's always been there. And I think the thing with striped bass is that you can just catch them any way you want to, really. When there's abundance of them around, they're everywhere from 100 feet of water offshore to filling channels and marshes and mud flats and sandy beaches. And so they just occupy a lot of different spaces. And striped bass will specialize on different ways of feeding. And so you have these groups that are very keen on feeding on the flats. And when I moved back from Colorado to Maine, I moved very close to this creek that you'd see it visually. And I remember being, like, oh my God, there was a lot of stripers on the flats back at that time period. And you'd be watching the sunset at a low tide and there'd just be fish waking around everywhere. I remember catching my first one out of a kayak on a crab in a foot of water. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to focus on as a guide. And so I really put the time in learning that. And the fisheries changed a lot, and over, I guess that's 12 years ago now, almost 15 years ago. The fisheries changed a lot, and the places I fish are a lot different. The flats still hold up, but it's different. We have a lot less stripers around now, but we have a good population of big fish. So it's totally different game, but the flats hold up.
What is that? Because I feel like, you and I sort of met basically 5 or 6 years ago because you wrote a piece for the Journal about stripers and about those big breeding fish.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've heard a bit, and it's something that I think I still don't completely, I haven't completely been able to wrap my head around, but just this idea of abundance of fish, or high numbers of fish versus maybe lower numbers of fish, but there's more breeding fish, right?
Yeah.
Because stripers, it takes them longer to get to breeding age and sort of breeding size. Like, what is that? What is the interplay between numbers and size and breeding population and everything?
Yeah. So striped bass are a slow grower. Yeah. They're an anadromous fish. They spawn in brackish, freshwater estuaries, rivers, mostly in the Chesapeake Bay, is the most prolific spawning ground. And it's the bigger these fish get, the stronger, they've got strong genetics, they've got the ability to get big, and their eggs are bigger, they're more packed with fat. There's way more than a fish that's 6-7 years old on its, one of its first spawns. If you get this 15, 18-year-old striper, they are just prolific spawners. They are just really effective, really. And so those are just such important fish to keep in our system. They're giving the gifts that keep on giving. And so when I wrote that piece, it was, there's this intuitive, old fish that are spawning in places that have a lot of pollution. Striped bass, I don't think there's a lot of these warnings out there that each state will give, like, don't eat more than 2 striped bass every 4 months. There's all these restrictions based on like the PCBs and the mercury levels in them. And so part of that piece was just like, let's eat the right fish, Definitely I'm catch and release it at heart. I love eating fish, but I just love to eat the right fish, the fish that's going to be healthy for me, that's going to be good for the stock. And so that's kind of what that's all about. Right now we're missing a lot of size classes of fish in the striped bass population. We have, decent number of big fish around, but we haven't had a successful spawn in 5 years. So we're like, geez, people keep, they're still.
So those big fish aren't being able to go and successfully spawn? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's very condition based.
Okay.
So if you get low water, it's too warm. It's you need the right conditions at the right time to have a successful spawn, and we just haven't had that for 5 years. So we get a very accurate young of year index each year from the Chesapeake Bay, and it's really good data. And so it's just been almost practically non-existent.
Wow.
So that's, another reason we need to just really take care of those big fish and just keep our fingers crossed for the right spawning conditions. Fingers crossed that we had a good spawn this year. We had good conditions for it. We paid really close attention, but we'll see what happens. So
what, coming up in that and trying to figure out, trying to start out as a striped bass guide, what were some of the, I guess, hurdles or difficulties in doing that? Did you run into any setbacks? Any good stories?
I mean, your first season, you're just like, well, I hope somebody calls and books me. So, I mean, that's the first one. You're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm doing this. I've quit another job. I hope I can make my living doing this. So I do remember the first clients that I got, they called me up, and they just sounded like just the most awesome first clients I could ever have. And I was like, I was like, I'm sure one of these other guides that doesn't want to see me come on the scene is like gonna like prank me, and this is like a setup, and I'm gonna be there at 5 a.m. and nobody's gonna show up. And as it turned out, it was like literally one of my 2 really, really good friends, one of them probably one of my best friends, stepped on my boat that morning, and we've been friends ever since. And now I'm in business with one of them at Soulfly Lodge. It's
oh, cool.
So, I mean, that was kind of like, I was like, I just can't believe people are calling and want to go fish, I mean, but I worked really hard, and that first guide trip, like, we got a handful of fish on the flats. We got some fish and some other elements. And I was like, okay, this is going to work. I can do this. Yeah. But, I think you're constantly like, feel like you're fighting that like imposter syndrome, like when you're getting going with something new like that. And, you hit tough conditions, and you get some, maybe the community isn't super, super welcoming to a new guide coming in. Definitely had a little bit of that for sure. A couple of people didn't want to see me, and you're kind of promoting your business too. 'Cause at that point I needed clients. And so you're promoting, probably pissing off other local guides. But then
was there a bit of that? Like, was there any element of, localism or just, sort of a local community of guides that didn't want to see somebody new coming in?
I think, maybe the older guides just kind of look at it like, well, let's see how this plays out. A little skeptical.
No cars getting burned down.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not.
As apparently happens on the Gas Bay Peninsula.
Yeah, totally. It was just, I think people were like, let's see what this kid does, and just kind of watch with a concerned eye. Mm-hmm. But I'm one of the people that stuck around, worked really hard, kind of occupied a space I wasn't pushing on other guides,
Mm-hmm.
I was really focusing on the flats thing, which helped, I think, to be like, I want to target fish on the fly rod in shallow water. A lot of guides kind of do a little bit of everything in terms of, bait, spin, fly. So I felt like focusing on that, I attracted a clientele at a little bit of a quicker clip. Because it's kind of very focused thing that just doesn't happen a ton in New England.
Yeah.
But
do you do all of your striped bass guiding? Is it all kind of right around your home turf there in Maine, or do you, do you travel a bit, I guess?
Yeah, it's, sometimes I go use a different boat ramp, but like this year I didn't use any other boat ramps other than my home one. Same thing with last year. And I had done there's some cool stuff a little bit south of me and a little bit north of me. But I don't do it all the time. It's just more like condition dependent, like let's go and swing for the fences to sight fish a big fish in a cool element or something. But mostly stick to my home water and got a pretty good range out of my zone. So
yeah. Well, so then how did tell me how Soulfly sort of came together? And one thing I'm curious about is, it seems like Soulfly Lodge is a bit of a departure from sort of the, traditional Bahamian flats fishing lodge. So yeah, tell me about how Soulfly came to be.
Yeah. So again, that big off season, needed something to do.
Like too much time on your hands.
Yeah.
So let's start a lodge.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. My wife, Kitri, was teaching at the time, and, I was guiding in the summers and piecing other stuff together in the winter. And she was like, I need a break from teaching. Let's go. Like, can you find us like a fishing lodge to go manage or do something totally different? I'm like, yeah, I will start working on that today. So I honestly started looking around and found something relatively quickly. I mean, a couple months later, we had some friends that were leaving a position and opened up an opportunity. It was kind of mid-season, wasn't an ideal baton transfer. But so I finished out a season down in Andros in the Bahamas, and my wife and I came back for the full year the next year. And Kitri quit her job. We moved down. What
lodge were you at?
This was at Bears Lodge in South Andros. Yeah. And so we went down and we just loved it. We where it was intimidating. You're working with guides that have been guiding for 30 years, and this team of hyper local people that are, is a pretty wild place. You've been to South Andros. It's got like a little bit of an edge to it, but it's also just a wonderful community too.
Yeah.
And so, that's how we really got started and fell in love with the Bahamas. And I definitely have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Maybe we can find something to do on our own, and just kind of kept the eyes and ears open. And just heard from a couple people that I respect a lot about the berries. Came up a couple times. It's just worth a trip over there. Yeah. And so, and you kind of, are tying in community too. Like we got over there, we connected to
the Berry Islands,
and wanted to see the fishery, of course. Yeah. And so far everything, like our whole mentality was see if we can talk ourselves out of this. So we were like, okay, this is a really cool island. There's really easy to get to, like a lot of things right out of the gate. We couldn't talk ourselves out of it. Yeah. The property we're staying at was amazing. and we connect with this guy, Percy Darville, who's been guiding for, over 50 years in the Berry Islands. And he's just this OG to the core, and just loves being on the water every day more than anything. Yeah. And so started fishing with Percy, started exploring. He knew we were sniffing around at this property for sale. And so he knew our intentions, but he had no clue who we are, what we were about. And so it was like courting Percy out of the gate of like, will this longtime OG guide work with us, team up and work with us? So it took a couple trips down and back. And on the final kind of scouting trip, sat with him and talked it all through. And he was like, we sighed relief, because he was like, where were you guys 10 years ago? He was excited, and it was coming out of COVID. So a lot of fishing guides, especially independent guides in the Bahamas, they didn't have much work at all. I mean, a lot of the lodges were shut down. And so it was a period where it was good timing. Percy, he wanted to be on the water, and he just wasn't getting the days. And so he said, yeah, let's tiptoe into this. Yeah. And we started with that. We presented him something that just really took good care of him and tied him into the business and took work off his plate. I'm like, you don't have to manage your boat anymore. You don't have to deal with your bookings. Like, we want to save you time, make this easier, keep you on the water where you want to be. And just an awesome friendship spurred from that, and was really if he said no, we wouldn't be there. Somebody else maybe would have come in, but we wouldn't have pursued it.
Really?
Yeah.
Really. So it sounds like, in some sense, your job, or you and Kittry's job, is almost like you're kind of an interface between, the people that want to fish and the locals who can take people fishing. Like, is that...
That's a good way to put it.
A good way to put it?
Absolutely.
Because, I've always been curious about why is it that, and maybe there are, but it seems like all of these lodges in the Bahamas are owned by Americans, right? I've always been curious about why exactly is it that, they aren't owned by Bahamians or run by Bahamians. And, and so I guess, maybe that makes sense in terms of just, maybe it's easier to just leave that side of the work to, somebody like you who wants to come in and do it. Is that the sense you have, or is that kind of how it plays out a little bit, you think?
Well, I think in like the Berry Islands in particular, there isn't a lot of, like, I have so many peers and mentors and across this industry, and in the Berry Islands, you're not going to find that, where somebody that's interested has that spirit to start a business. There's not a lot of mentoring around. There's not anybody to learn from. How do you market? How do you attract clients, foreign clients to this place, and learn all those skills to get people there? Where I think if you look at Andros is, I might misquote this, but it's pretty darn close. 75% of the GDP on Andros is from fly fishing lodges. So it's much more part of that culture. And there you find a lot more Bahamian owned and operated ones, because they're learning through the boot camp of guiding and seeing how these lodges operate from, their father, their mother, and those businesses get passed on, or somebody breaks off and starts another lodge and is Bahamian owned and operated. And so I think it can be challenging in these very siloed communities to have this, to kind of really have the background and the guidance to be able to start something like that. And so I think that's why you see that, especially in, especially places like the Berries, where there's not an example. And so there was some independent guides that were operating, but I don't think, the independent guides that we work with, that are now on our team, didn't want to do a lot of the other stuff. They're like, put me on the water. That's where I belong. And, a lot of people are like, oh, you must just fish all the time and, just have this dreamy life down there. It's dreamy when we're there. But it's a lot of work, and we're dealing with them on my computer. The staff's like, get up from your computer, man. Like, well, we just got to keep getting good people here. So somebody's got to work on that.
Yeah.
So, I think in a lot of cases, there's some really wonderful operations that are Bahamian owned and operated. And there's, and then there's some opportunities for folks like Kitchery and I that care about the community, that want to leave as much money in the community as we possibly can, treat people well, where it also is a great model. But
Dave McCoy was telling me that you guys have maybe an agreement sort of with the community that every Friday night the lodge is sort of opened up for everybody to come have dinner. Is that right? Like what is that set up?
That puts it in a fun way, but we basically open our restaurant Friday and Saturday night.
Yeah.
We're doing all the work anyways. We've got the whole food service program, but on Friday and Saturday night, like open it up to the whole community, and we just it's an awesome time. It's probably a lot of the lodge guests' favorite night because
that's what Dave was saying is when he's been there with a group, he said like that's the best night of the week is when everybody from the island is there and having dinner together and hanging out and whatnot. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
And like a lot of our staff is over all the time, guides are over. We're not, forcing anybody, you got to come over, it's kind of just a meeting place, which is kind of what we wanted.
Yeah.
But
what was it about that Berry Islands location and fishery that kind of made it stand out for you?
Well, I love the diversity there. I love that it's challenging. And it really does have, kind of a good chunk of mature fish that are big and smart.
Permit or everything?
Permit and bones. For, both of them are, I wouldn't say it's a nursery fishery by any means. It's definitely like, real grown up smart fish. I mean, you get your days where you catch plenty of fish, of course, but like it's a good place to hunt a special fish. And the permit fishing is excellent there. It's, you can have some really cool stuff. And it's singles, doubles, sometimes you see some scary big fish. And so that really captivated us. And then there's, a handful of other species out on the flats too. And, but the community was really great. It was just like, it was easy to get to. I mean, it was almost one of those places where like, I can't believe we're the first people to start this here. Like I just couldn't believe that we had that opportunity. So,
that's cool. What about some of the guides you found that you were telling me about Travis Sands earlier today? Tell me about the guides that are part of Soulfly, and it sounds like Travis especially. Just sort of their connection to that fishery and to the community as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, building the team and having the right people there is just everything. And that's, the guide team being at the core of that, probably chef and the guide team. I mean, everybody does an incredible job, but you're stuck on your boat all day with your guides. So we really tried to build a team of folks that were just fun to be around and really good at their jobs. And Travis, we were talking with Travis very early in the cycle of, we knew we were pulling it together and started having conversations about him coming over to work with us. And, so we've got a cool span. We've got Percy as like the lead sled dog, and he kind of watches over the rest of the guide team, and Percy moves slow and talks slow. And
how old is he?
Has kind of a different accent. Percy's turning 72 in October.
He's still guiding.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
he's amazing.
He's kind of got his program, he's got his routine. So Percy plays a role on our team. Yeah. And like a lot of people are just like enthralled to fish with this living legend. And then we kind of work down into Freddie, who's just like, I've never heard somebody describe the world the way Freddie does. He just sees things different, it's just
like how so?
It's so hard to put a finger on. It's just so pure and matter of fact, but in like a soft, gentle way. Mm-hmm. And
how old is Freddie?
Freddie is in his 50s. Okay. And he's been guiding for 27 years now. Yeah. He was a South Andros boy. Okay. Guided in a couple different islands, and now is really taking on the challenge of becoming a permit guide, which is cool because, a lot of guys that have been at it for a while in the Bahamas may not, be interested at that stage of their career to start fishing for really freaking hard fish. Yeah. And Freddie is just fired up. And, Freddie's singing on the boat. I mean, I think he gets more excited than the clients sometimes catching fish. And, and then Travis is arguably one of the best guys in the Caribbean. I mean, he is, and I echo words that I hear from clients saying. I try not to be overly pump my good buddy up, but he's exceptional. He's just like a guy that was born to be doing what he's doing, and he's always sharpening his craft. Mm-hmm. And then from there what
do you think it is that what is that makes people appreciate him so much, or want to fish with him so much, or just makes him an effective flats guide?
Yeah, he's so good at being at the right place at the right time and very quickly understanding if he's not. So he doesn't. There's very little waste in his day. Yeah. And on top of that, you add in that he's just this magnetic personality. His laugh is contagious. I don't know how he's got enough room in his head to remember all the jokes that he has memorized. He's just one of those guys. He's just kind of the full package. He cares about conservation. He's a leader. And he's just kind of the total package, and he's just always trying to get better. Always, every day, always taking advantage of every run. He's not just sitting on his bench seat, staring ahead. He's looking at the flats. He's looking at, he might pull a Yui when you already thought you were on your way home and there's a permit on array and you're going to get another shot. So he's just always hunting, which is really cool. And somebody that's trying that hard and that's so engaged day in and day out, it just is like, almost like that, putting that 1% in more, it just adds up to it adds up a lot. Yeah. And he's been, we couldn't do it without him. Honestly, we couldn't do it without the whole team. But he's been a important piece.
It sounds like you've been lucky, with the crew that has kind of coalesced around you down there.
Yeah, definitely.
And you guys are, I can't remember exactly, but you're working on sort of trying to help more guides or develop younger guys into becoming guides, right? Yeah. What is that work and that process been looking like?
Yeah, so we've trained since we've come to the island. We've trained 2 new guides that are guiding and doing well. Which is cool because, we could very much so look around, make some offers, trying to attract somebody that's been at it for 15 years to the island, but you're almost just not doing a service to the industry and to your local communities if you don't do it the hard way. Find the right people that are passionate about it and teach them something, because you're growing it from the community up, versus kind of stealing a guide from another place. And we've got another guide that's probably finishing training an hour ago for the day, with Travis. Travis is training. Cool. So it's cool because we'll get a lot of, you can have, kind of like our maintenance operations position can be kind of like that, that almost like you always have a guide in training in that job. Yeah. And so we've got this guy, Devonti, who is doing great, and he's 19 and we're working on him. But as a whole, we're also trying to shed some more light on that challenge. I want to get the statistics of the demographic of guides in the Bahamas, but it's aging rapidly, and there's a lot more older guides than there is young guides, and the young guides aren't really replacing the older ones. So it's you know, and those are the people that are out there protecting the flats.
Yeah.
So it's important to address it and figure it out, and but a lot of work, you know, it's hard. I mean, because you've got to pay your guide that's going to be training somebody. You have to pay the person that you're training. And it's a lot easier to just get into the construction field where you're making money day in, day out. You know, it's a lot to become a guide in such a complex sport. So it's like, we're always working on it, working on that. And
well, you know, it's a cool thing. Like I said, I think, you know, from what I've seen, you guys have really gone into that whole project, it seems like, with a focus, you know, not on profit, but on, you know, you're going to support yourself and your family, but even more, you know, you're supporting everybody involved there, and you're, you know, really pushing for sustainability, and then on top of all of that, you're, you know, out here doing all of this other work with ASGA, and it's really admirable. So I just, you know, that's been one really fun thing about doing the podcast and doing this first season of the podcast is and you know, Kopi's not here for this interview, unfortunately, but we've gotten to talk to a lot of people that I find very inspiring for a variety of reasons, and who you know, are out there, you know, getting their hands dirty and getting the work done, and it's cool to see it. It gives me hope. I hope it gives lots of other people hope, and I hope it, you know, spurs lots of other people onto action as well. So, but Kyle, thanks, man. It was great to talk to you. It was great to spend the last week with you, and you know, Godspeed.
Thanks, man.
Keep doing it. Not everybody can, but you're out there doing it, and we're lucky to have guys like you.
Well, thanks. Right back at you. Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. Sidechannels is produced and edited by yours truly, with production support from Jeff Galbraith and Colin Wiseman, and digital and web support from Jesse Lou Galbraith, Colby Messick, and Kopi Voita. If you're enjoying Sidechannels, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to rate and review the show. It makes a big difference. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Decked. Get decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish. And Patagonia Fly Fishing, dependable gear built to connect with wild fish. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fish to learn more. And of course, have fun out there, enjoy the process, and we'll see you soon with Season 2.